Hi, and welcome to That Cancer Conversation, the podcast from Cancer Research UK that brings together the science and the stories behind cancer with me, Sophie Brooks. As summer approaches, we're hoping that we get to enjoy some sunny weather, but with great weather comes great responsibility. The sun's UV rays are the main cause of melanoma, the most serious form of skin cancer, and we're seeing an all-time high in reported cases. In this episode, I'm chatting to Sophie Brooks, who works for the Health Information team at Cancer Research UK, to help answer some of the biggest questions around skin cancer and advise how we can stay safe in the sun. Sophie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. So skin cancer, what is it? And how many cases do we see a year in the UK?
Yeah, so skin cancer is when abnormal cells in our skin start to grow and divide in an uncontrolled way. So it can be helpful to think about the structure of our skin. So our skin contains many different types of cells, and these actually form two main layers to our skin. So we have the epidermis, which is the outermost layer and our protective barrier to the world. And then below this is the dermis. So most skin cancers actually happen in the epidermis. And melanoma is the fifth most common cancer in the UK. And this develops in the deeper cells of the epidermis, so in cells called melanocytes. And these actually produce a pigment known as melanin, as this is what gives our skin its colour and is also what makes us tan in the sun. But melanoma is the most serious type of skin cancer. So there's actually two different types of skin cancer, non-melanoma and melanoma skin cancer. And as you mentioned before, it is the most serious type. And so we need to think of all the different ways you can reduce our risk of melanoma.
What are some common signs or symptoms to recognise, say, melanoma compared to a mole? That might be harmless.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to melanoma, many people think about an abnormal mole. But actually, melanoma can develop anywhere across the skin. So it can develop from a new or an existing mole, but it can actually develop from a completely normal patch of skin. And it can also develop on our palms or the soles of our feet as well, or even under a nail. So it's really important that if you notice any unusual skin changes, so whether that is to a mole or a patch of skin, that you do speak to your doctor, because the sooner it's spotted, the better chance of successful treatment. So yeah, it's really important that we are going to the doctor if we notice any unusual skin changes for you.
And it's interesting you said that it could be on a palm, on the bottom of, a foot, under a nail. And you don't think of those things exposed to the sun. And I think a lot of people think skin cancer and sun kind of go hand in hand. Is sun a big cause of skin cancer, or is it maybe not the main cause?
Yes, absolutely. So we actually know that many cases of skin cancer are preventable. So actually 87% of melanoma skin cases every year are caused by UV radiation and overexposure to UV radiation. So yeah, we do know that the sun is a big factor when it comes to melanoma risk. So this is why our behaviours in the sun, our precautions when the sun is strong, can actually have a really big impact on our risk of melanoma. And we know that people with lighter skin tones are actually at a higher risk of developing melanoma. So people with light and fair hair, or people even with red hair and lots of freckles, they are at a higher risk of developing melanoma. But this doesn't mean that people with darker skin tones can't get melanoma. So often people ask us, so if I have darker skin, if black or brown skin, can I still develop melanoma? And it's actually true. So all people can develop melanoma. It can affect us all. So it's really important that we all think about how to protect our skin when the sun is strong.
And I mean, we're not in the sunniest of climates here in the UK.
Yes.
But when the sun does come out, I think a lot of people have the urge to make the most of it. But how do we balance enjoying the sun while staying safe in the sun?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we know when it's sunny outside, everyone wants to head outside and enjoy the sun. But it is really important that we take precautions in the sun to protect our skin. So there's three main steps that are really important for us to remember. And that's to seek shade, to cover up, and then to apply sunscreen regularly and generously. So if we start with number one, let's think about seeking shade. So especially between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. in the UK. This is when the sun is the strongest. And so think about heading indoors, maybe taking a break from the sun for a little while, or seeking shade under trees, parasols, umbrellas. However you can create some shade, it just helps to give a little break from the sun and protect your skin from those UV rays. And then number two, so wear clothing, have a wide-brimmed hat, and wear UV protection sunglasses. So essentially, the more skin that you can cover, the better. So think about wearing t-shirts that cover at least your shoulders, we know that many people find that they get a bit quite hot when the sun's out, and so people tend to take the clothing off. But this actually means that you're exposing more of your skin to the sun's UV rays. So do try to cover up your skin, wear that wide-brimmed hat and your UV protection sunglasses. And then number 3, so use sunscreen regularly and apply often. So make sure that you are using a sunscreen with an SPF 30 or higher, and then also look for the 4 or 5 stars. And you can also look for UVA. You often find it in the bottle. So UVA in a circle, that also indicates that it's protecting against UVA rays, which are also really important.
And with UV, I mean, how does UV impact skin cancer? How does it cause it in a way?
Yeah, so a really good question. So UV radiation is produced naturally from the sun. So it's a type of energy that the sun gives off. And we can actually have artificial UV radiation as well. So that's what you find in sunbeds. But if we're exposed to too much UV radiation, it can actually damage the DNA within our skin cells. Now, our DNA tells our cells how to grow and function and behave. And so if this DNA becomes damaged, it can cause our cells to grow uncontrollably and divide in a way that they're not meant to. And so that is what can go on to cause skin cancer. So it's really important that we protect our skin to stop this damage from happening, and therefore we can stop that skin cancer from growing.
And like, I think a lot of people will check on the app, like the UV number, like, is it high UV? Is it low UV? Even if it's low UV, does that mean we need to still consider staying safe in the sun?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So it's a common misconception that people actually think they only need to protect their skin when they're in a really hot, sunny country or even on a really hot day in the UK. But it's actually not entirely true. So in the UK, the sun can actually be strong enough from mid-March to mid-October. And that sun can actually cause damage to your skin within those months. So the best way to know how strong the sun is and how strong those UV rays are is to check the UV index. Now, the UV index can be found on most weather reports, so we can find it online or on weather apps on your phone. And so by checking that UV index, you can find out how strong the sun's rays are, and therefore if you need to take protection. So most people say that if you get to a UV rating of 3, then to consider the 3 sun safety steps.
Okay, so if it's 3, it's 3.
3 or higher, then it's time to think about those 3 steps we mentioned. So seek shade, cover up, and apply sunscreen.
And in terms of vitamin D, I think a lot of people think, well, I need to get my vitamin D, and that's the only way is through the sun. How do we balance that? And are there any myths or misconceptions around that sort of area?
Yeah, so this is a really common misconception. So it's true that we all need enough vitamin D. It helps keeps our muscles, our bones and our teeth strong. And actually, if we have low vitamin D, it can cause health problems. So it is something to think about. But actually, we don't need to be sunbathing or purposely exposing our skin to get enough vitamin D. We know that actually short breaks in the sun, so we're talking minutes rather than hours, is all you need to get all the vitamin D you need. So you don't need to be worrying about going out and sunbathing to get enough vitamin D. You're actually more likely that you're already out and about enough with exposed skin to be getting enough vitamin D as it is.
And you mentioned briefly about sunbeds. It's becoming a popular trend again. I think there was a report that I think it's an increase in 40% in 18 to 35-year-olds sunbed tanning. It's quite a big problem in the UK. Why is sunbed tanning a problem?
Yeah, so sunbeds actually produce an artificial UV radiation. So just like from the sun, a UVA radiation can damage the skin cells on our skin. So really, it works in the same way, but actually it's a lot more intense than what we would expect from the UK sun. And it also has a slightly different ratio of UV rays. So the sun naturally produces 3 types of UV radiation. So UVA, UVB, and UVC. Luckily, we don't need to worry about UVC, so it's blocked by the ozone layer and doesn't reach the Earth's surface. But we do need to protect against UVA and UVB, so that's what our sunscreen does. So when we look for SPF, that's protection against UVB rays, and when we look at the star rating, that's protection against UVA rays. Now, sunbeds actually produce a lot more UVA rays than UVB. So actually the proportion of UV actually reaching our skin when we use a sunbed is different to the natural sun. And again, it's also a higher intensity than what we would expect from the UK sun. So every time you use a sunbed, you are actually damaging your skin and increasing the risk of skin cancer. So it is a really serious thing. And it is really concerning that we are seeing rates in the UK rise. And there's a few reasons why this could be. So we know there is still a desire to have a tanned complexion. So this is something that people are still seeking. And at CRUK, we talk a lot about owning your tone and feeling comfortable and confident in the natural skin tone that you have. And we really want to come away from this idea that tan skin is a beauty ideal. And we really want people just to protect and love the skin that they have. And so we do a lot of work trying to tackle the misinformation around sunbeds. As we know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So they are often sold as a safe way to get a tan. And then they're also sold as maybe like a wellness treatment to get enough vitamin D. And this is actually really misleading. So we know that sunbeds are not a safe way of tanning. In fact, there actually is no safe way of tanning using UV radiation. So that one we can bust quite easily. And there's actually really strong evidence to show that using sunbeds increases our risk of skin cancer. And then around the vitamin D, again, is often sold as a safe way of getting vitamin D, which is really quite scary because it's not a safe way at all of tanning and getting vitamin D. And like I mentioned, that UVB to UVA ratio is actually quite different in sunbeds. So they use a lot more UVA, but it's UVB we need to get vitamin D. So actually that is quite misleading that they are a good source of getting enough vitamin D. And we know that actually using sunbeds, that harms do outweigh any possible benefit. So at CRUK, we really do recommend that everyone avoids using sunbeds completely.
So not all impacts are equal. Some are worse than others, really.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that actually. We know that both rays can cause skin cancer. So we know that actually both UVB and UVA are important. But the ratio with sunbeds is just slightly different than what we'd expect from the natural sun, and also the intensity. So we know that actually it's a lot stronger than the UK sun. So yeah, it's a bit of both, really. A bit of combination of the rays that are hitting us and the intensity of the rays that are really causing that damage when we use sunbeds.
What are the regulations around sunbed usage in the UK?
Yeah, so actually CRUK was really instrumental in getting this law passed through Parliament. So since 2010, it's actually illegal for people under the age of 18 to use sunbeds, and it is an offence for any business to offer UV tanning services to people under the age of 18. And CRUK ran a really successful campaign to help get this through Parliament. So we helped raise awareness of the dangers of sunbeds and tried to tackle all that misinformation that we've just spoken about. And so, yeah, our successful campaign managed to get that through Parliament, and now it is illegal for people under the age of 18 to use sunbeds. So CRUK continues to raise awareness around sunbeds and tackle that misinformation, just make people really aware of the dangers.
So you said, at Cancer Research UK, we're always trying to push for change, especially in a political space. But I think a lot of people will wonder, well, why aren't they banned in the UK if they are really bad for us?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like I said, CRUK do a lot of work to try to tackle the misinformation around sunbeds and to really raise awareness of the dangers and get regulation put through Parliament. But we do know that there are other factors that can increase our risk of cancer. So firstly, we know that smoking is the biggest cause of cancer in the UK, followed secondly by obesity and overweight. So there's lots of other campaigns that we are running at CRUK, and we're trying to focus on the things that have the biggest impact. And yes, while sunbeds do increase our risk of skin cancer, we are doing a lot of work already in this field. So like I said, we are already speaking a lot about the dangers, the misinformation, and trying to encourage people to avoid sunbeds. And at the moment, we're actually doing some really important research. So we have completed a survey with 4,200 people. And we're looking at the attitudes, behaviour and knowledge of adults in the UK around sun safety and sunbeds. So this will give us a really good insight into what people believe about sunbeds, their behaviour really in the sun in the UK. So yeah, we'll have a lot of insights from that piece of research too.
Yeah, I think that'll be quite important because in a way, we're looking at this increase in a younger generation, Generation Z, for a lot of people. But it seems to be like maybe the information isn't reaching the youngest generation coming up in terms of skin safety. So do you think that's something that we have to keep pushing, or is that also a responsibility for the government to enforce as well?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So CRUK continue to work really closely with the government to try and encourage them to have stricter regulations when it comes to sunbeds, and to also make them well aware of the dangers when it comes to sunbeds and the misinformation that is spreading around as well. I think when it comes to younger people, it's often what they see on social media that can sometimes change our perceptions or the choices that we make. And so we know that often celebrities, influencers and things are put on social media that actually are encouraging people to have this tanned complexion or to use sunbeds. And I think that sometimes is why people are using sunbeds more often and why we might be seeing this increase. So there's quite a few reasons why we might be seeing an increase in young people, but this is just one factor that could be having that impact. Is actually we're now seeing sunbeds being spoken a lot more on social media. We're seeing people promote having this tanned skin. So, like I said, that can really impact people's choices and perceptions on sunbeds.
Mm. And in terms of sunscreen, what kind of misconceptions or myths do you see around sunscreen, if any?
Yeah, we do see a lot of myths around sunscreen. So we know that people actually don't reapply sunscreen often enough, and they don't put enough on in the first place. So at CR UK, we talk a lot about making sure people reapply throughout the day. So people often think that if you have like a once a day sunscreen, that's enough. But it's not. Actually, these sunscreens do need to be reapplied often. So especially when you've come out the sea or come out the swimming pool and you're toweling, you're actually rubbing off that sunscreen. So make sure you are reapplying often and throughout the day. And we also know that people maybe aren't using sunscreen at a high enough SPF. So on the survey that I mentioned, actually only 30% of people were able to correctly identify the minimum recommended SPF. So that's not really that high. And then when it comes to the star rating, actually only 15% of people were able to correctly identify the minimum rating. So we do need to get that information out there and spread that widely, that these are the recommendations for your sunscreen that you are using. So yeah, there's a lot we can be learning, a lot of information we can be sharing.
Yeah, and it's very important to keep our skin safe. And I think we maybe find it quite easy to overlook or maybe cut it out of our routine. Where there's a lot of people that are very into their skincare. I think skincare is a very popular aspect as well and a popular trend. Putting on sunscreen every day, is that necessary?
Yeah, we get often asked this question. So actually, when it comes to cancer risk, you don't need to be wearing sunscreen every day. We know that we need to balance it with vitamin D as well. So there isn't no need to wear sunscreen every day. But you do need to think about it when the sun is strong. So like I said, between that mid-March and mid-October, even the UK sun is strong enough to cause damage. So between those months, do be getting in the habit of checking the UV index and seeing if you do need to take protection for your skin. So yeah, you don't need to use sunscreen every day. There's no need to go out and buy, fancy sunscreens for your face. Any sunscreen that is at least SPF 30 and 4 or 5 stars is good enough and will do the job and will help protect your skin. But it's important to remember that sunscreen doesn't give 100% protection. So we do need to use it in combination with shade and clothing. So that is really important. People often think, I've got my sunscreen on and that's enough. But actually, it's never going to give you 100% protection. It doesn't make tanning safe, and it doesn't mean we can spend longer out in the sun. So we do still need to be seeking shade and covering up our skin as much as possible.
And even though maybe you've done those 3 things that you mentioned, seeking shade, sunscreen, covering up, it's things that need to keep doing as well, and not just, well, I did that today, so I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly. So when the sun is strong, this is something we need to be thinking about all the time. So it's not something that we just do one day and then we move on and we think, okay, I protected myself that day. But yeah, if the sun is strong throughout the summers, we can have quite long summers in the UK, and that sun can be strong enough throughout that period. So yeah, it is an everyday thing. We do need to be checking that UV index and get into the habit of checking that and seeing actually, is it above UV 3, and should I be thinking about sun protection and think about covering up my skin or putting on our sunscreen. So yeah, as you say, it is something we do need to think about often.
So does sunscreen make it harder to absorb vitamin D, or is that a myth as well?
Yeah, so this is a common question and something that people often worry about. So in theory, it is true. So sunscreen actually could make it harder for your skin to produce vitamin D. And that's because it protects against UVB radiation. And as we already mentioned, UVB radiation is what is needed to make vitamin D. However, in reality, people actually don't wear enough sunscreen and they don't reapply often enough. And we know that sunscreen doesn't give us 100% protection from the sun's UV rays. So really, people aren't wearing enough sunscreen. We know it doesn't give 100% protection. So UVB rays are still reaching our skin. So there's no need to be purposely exposing your skin or not wearing sunscreen to get enough vitamin D. we know that only short breaks in the sun are enough to get the vitamin D you need. So between the months of mid-March and mid-October, most people are actually getting all the vitamin D they need just by heading outdoors and having short breaks in the sun. But we know that it is a common misconception that people think they need to spend a lot of time in the sun. So a survey that we did at CRUK shows that actually 35% of people agree with the statement that I need to spend as much time as possible out in the sun to get enough vitamin D. So it's a really important thing for us to challenge and to get rid of that misinformation around it, because we don't want people purposely sunbathing or exposing their skin and not using sunscreen to get enough vitamin D.
And what's like the right amount of sunscreen to put on, if there is any?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we tell people to make sure they apply their sunscreen thickly. So often people don't actually wear enough sunscreen. We do need to make sure we're putting a really thick layer of sunscreen over our skin, and that will help protect our skin from the sun's UV rays. But we know it doesn't give 100% protection. So we do need to make sure that we are also seeking shade and wearing clothing, wearing our wide-brimmed hat, wearing our UV sunglasses. So yeah, it's a good question and one that we are often asked. Another question people often ask us is, so what sunscreen do I buy? I know it can be quite confusing. And so there's two main things that we need to look out for. So we know the sun produces 3 types of UV ray. We only need to worry about UVB and UVA. They're the ones that we do need to protect our skin from. So firstly, when you're out and about shopping, you're looking for your sunscreen, look for at least an SPF 30. And that is the protection against UVB rays. Then you also need to look for 4 or 5 stars. So that's a star rating. You'll be able to see that on the bottle. And that's one that sometimes people forget about. And that's actually the protection against UVA rays. You might also see it's a UVA in like a little circle on the bottle. And that's enough as well. So you need to either look for the circle or look for 4 or 5 stars. And like I said, that's protection for UVA rays. So people quite often know about SPF, but perhaps not about the star rating. So again, that's a really important one for people to look at when they're buying their sunscreen.
And what does like SPF, like the factors, what does that mean when people are looking at it? Because some people know it's factor 30, factor 50, but what does that translate to? And what do the stars translate to?
So SPF means sun protection factor. And it's actually more about how quickly your skin turns red and how quickly it would burn. And so it's more about, if you're using these sunscreens, how long will it reduce the amount of time for your skin to burn or turn red, essentially. So people often think you have to use the highest protection, so you're using SPF as high as it can go. But actually, this often means that people put on one layer of sunscreen and they think, because I've got SPF 50 on, it will last all day, I won't get burnt. But actually, we encourage people to use SPF 30 or higher. And that's because we want people to be reapplying their sunscreen regularly. We want people to be using their sunscreen, but making sure they are reapplying throughout the day, and so you're not getting burnt. And then when it comes to star rating, it's a similar thing, but it's for the UVA rays. So that's the rating that is given to make sure there is a high enough protection against UVA rays. And so it can be the 4 or 5 stars or the UVA rating in a little circle on the bottle.
So, high ratings are good, but actually frequent application is also just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do know that if people are putting on a very high rating of sunscreen, they often aren't then reapplying regularly enough. And that can actually put you at a higher risk of getting skin cancer because you're not protecting your skin sufficiently.
So we've covered a lot, but to summarize, with hopefully sunnier days coming ahead, how can we look after our skin?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we know that many skin cancers are preventable. So actually 87% of melanoma cases each year in the UK can be prevented. And we know that most skin cancers are caused by overexposure of UV radiation. So this is why it's so vital that people take steps to protect their skin while enjoying the sun safely and avoid sunbeds completely. So since 2012, CRUK has partnered with Nivea Sun to raise vital funds for skin cancer research, and also to help educate millions of people on how to enjoy the sun safely using our 3 steps: seek shade, cover up, and apply sunscreen regularly and generously. So make sure you're using all 3 steps together. Make sure you're checking the UV index. We know this changes throughout the day and depending on our location. So get in the habit of checking that frequently and thinking, do I need to protect my skin today? Is the UV index above 3? Is it time for me to consider those 3 sun safety steps? And we know that actually the UV rating can be above 3 even on cooler or cloudy days. So don't just assume that because it's a bit cloudier, it's a little bit cooler, the sun can be strong enough to still damage your skin. So consider taking those 3 sun safety steps and reducing your risk of skin cancer.
Amazing. Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, I'll be speaking to Jack, who shares his story on being diagnosed with skin cancer at just 21 years old and how sunbed tanning might have played a big role. While it's nice to enjoy the sun, there's no such thing as a safe UV tan. Sunbeds are known to increase a person's risk of developing certain types of skin cancers. But the use of tanning sunbeds have made an alarming comeback with younger generations recently. In 2024, a survey by the charity Melanoma Focus found that 28% of UK adults use sunbeds, and seeing a rise to 43% among 18 to 25-year-olds. I'm joined by Jack, who was a regular user of sunbeds as a teenager and was diagnosed with skin cancer at 21 years old before going through treatment. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So you were diagnosed with skin cancer?
I was, yeah.
What type of skin cancer was it?
So I had stage 3 advanced melanoma, which is like a borderline stage 4 cancer. I had it originally in my back, spread straight through to my groin, and then up to the entirety of the top half of my body, more or less.
And you found that out at 21 years
21 years old, yeah.
God.
So it was around now 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That it was all kind of come to light. I had a small mole on my back, which was slightly raised. So I just thought this time it was an insect bite. It got really itchy, started to bleed. So I couldn't actually see a doctor at the time. So I had to email a picture because of COVID. You couldn't really do anything. Mm-hmm. And that doctor actually seen the email and just sent me straight to the hospital that same morning. I had a biopsy taken, and then around 10 days later, they rang me to say it was cancer.
How did you feel getting that news?
It was a shock. I always say it's like one of the only days in my life that I just don't remember. It just seems to be like a complete blur. It almost just felt like the world just stopped spinning. It was the most bizarre. I mean, I was 21. I just never expected to hear those words in my life. But I think the narrative of skin cancer I had in my head was much easier than what it turned out to be. So I think a part of me, as much as I was really devastated and just upset at what was going on, I kind of just thought it would be a mole removal and that would kind of be, I'd be able to move on. And I just was so incredibly wrong with what I thought.
What did have to happen?
So the weeks following my diagnosis, it was a constant meeting with different doctors, different teams, exploring sort of routes we could go down with what was going to be the next steps. And we went on a trial that failed. I had a surgery that failed. Then I had radio that didn't work either. And then I had to have 3 surgeries in one go, which left me, I couldn't walk more. I was just completely just out of it. That also failed, and that took us to the December of that year, and then that's when they told me that I was on my final option, which was the treatment plan I had for a year, and they actually told me if that failed too, then I'd have about 12 months to live. So thankfully, I just went into it with an open mind and just thought I have to make this work. There's no other option, and I stuck with it, and thankfully a year later I was cancer-free, which was kind of a miracle.
I mean, that must have been such a heavy process to go through and just constant.
Yeah, it was. It was just like deflating, you know what I mean? And almost in a sense kind of like dehumanizing, because I just felt like everything I was doing just wasn't worth it. And the amount I was putting my body through and myself through is just so intense that sort of year, that 6 months of my life was probably the most intense I'll ever have in my entire life. And I think it'll stay with me forever, that kind of fear that I felt just for 6 continuous months, that there was just going to be no way we could get rid of this or fix what had been done. But yeah, it really was strange and weird, and something I don't think I'll ever really understand. You know, I don't think I'll ever be able to digest everything that went on in that time frame.
Absolutely. And then you've got kind of all the jargon that comes with it, all the doctors and the researchers. It's such a completely different environment.
Yeah, it is. And I've never had any health problems in my life. So doctors and hospitals was a complete unknown to me. I broke my leg when I was young, and that was the only ever time, I think, apart from that, from when I was born, was the only time I ever really stepped foot in a hospital. So it was a complete new life for me. I had no idea what was going on. And also what was really difficult is my area is quite small place. So I was diagnosed when I was 21, which in the hospital world, you're still classed as a child. So I was treated through different teams. So I was actually treated through 3 different hospitals. So I was around, hospitals that were all different teams of all different doctors, and it was really intense. And obviously, like I said, I couldn't have anybody in with me. I was on my own for the entire time because of COVID.
What kind of things were helping you through that period? Or like,
the loneliness, I don't think anything could have helped. I mean, I had the most amazing nurses and doctors who just went above and beyond to make me feel comfortable, and all my friends and my family done the most they could with what they could. But for me, when I started posting online, it just opened up a world of other sort of possibilities for me, and being able to meet friends that now are like my best friends. We speak every single day because we got to share the same experience. As awful as it was, we connected through something really horrific, but having that space to create videos, create posts online that kind of distracted me from actually what was going on, give me something to do, and let me meet friends who are, really important to me now, was kind of like my biggest distraction through it all, for sure.
And giving you a community, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And like, we kind of talk about it now. A lot of us who were diagnosed in the midst of COVID, it was really difficult. We had no like sort of way to connect with anybody else, meet anybody else who's going through similar sort of situations as us. And it was just that kind of different way of doing it has, like, I think brought us all together a bit more, and given us that community where we really just all will push each other and kind of help each other. And the new people that are being diagnosed, which is just awful. But I think we're able to give our past experiences forward to kind of give hope to the younger people that are being diagnosed.
And finding that positive aspect.
Yeah.
So,
and it does really help you push to see the positivity. I mean, I'm not a negative person at all. I hate to be negative. So for me, I'll find a positive in anything. But I think it is really difficult to find positive in having cancer. It's just terrible, and there is no positive. But yeah, it really does help you see that there is good in terrible things, and you are able to find a slight purpose in, maybe sacrificing some things that you previously had. Yeah.
And you're a professional TikToker, I would say. And you have a lot of videos that talk about raising awareness of skin cancer and your experience. What made you want to talk about it on that platform?
A large part of it was, like I said, I had this sort of idea in my head that it was just going to be a simple mole removal and then I could just move on with my life. And I think that period in my life, that 2 years of my life that was so just bizarre and strange and terrifying, really pushed me to like want more people to know that it isn't what we kind of have this idea of. And I think the world has this idea of skin cancer where it's just have your mole removed. It's just this easy little cancer that really needs nothing, when it's not. It's far, far, far deeper than what we're kind of telling people. And people will say like, oh, but the consequences of using Sunbeds. And yeah, we do. We do know the consequences of using Sunbeds, but not to the extent of what it can be. And I think if I was able to, push that message across social media, which I think, not to blow my own, but I think I've done a pretty good job at doing over the past kind of 4 years of my life. I just want more people to realise that it's far, far deeper than what we see and what you hear. And it's not just having a mole cut out and you kind of just moving on with your life. It's possibly costing your entire life. And it almost cost mine at 21 and 22 and 23. You know, it was a really long period of my life, and a time that I'll never get back. And if I had to go through that, and I can stop somebody else going through it, then, you know, I think that is a job well done for me. You know.
And did you know about like the risks of sunbed tanning?
Yeah, I knew, but I was young. And I was just invincible. I never believed that I was ever going to be ill in my life, as we all do when we're young.
Yeah.
You know, we don't think that will ever happen to us. I mean, we see it everywhere. But I think a part of me was not ready to accept that, you know, that is a possibility. And I just didn't want to, like, look too far deep into life that, you know, that could happen. And I was just ignorant to what could have gone on. But yeah, I did know... I knew the extent of what could happen. I didn't know the severity of how bad it could go.
Yeah. I think it's hard to imagine yourself as part of a statistic that you don't relate to. And it's really, I think even any age, you know, it's hard to envision the risks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so, I mean, my experience was extremely rare. No doctor that have seen over the past 4 years of my life can ever work out how it happened the way it happened. It's just a complete, just unawareness of anybody I've seen, any doctor, any nurse. Nobody can ever understand it. So it is extremely unheard of at my age what happened to me, but it's proof that it can happen. You know, and I think if I'm there and I've lived that experience and I've shown everybody the last 4 years what it looks like, then it can happen to anybody at any age. You know, it just because I was 21, it could still happen to you when you're 18. It could still happen to you when so on. You know, it's happened and it's there, and it's, you know, as much as people can't work it out, it's a reality. And I never believed that for myself, you know.
Yeah. And how, you know, kind of looking back pre-diagnosis and now, how was your relationship around the idea of sun safety, sunbed tanning? How's that changed for you?
Completely. First and foremost, the tables have just completely flipped. I was just completely naive before, and I just didn't want to know before. I kind of enjoyed being, if it was sunny, I'd be out all day long. I would refuse to go to bed or inside anywhere until the sun had gone down, and I'd be out until at the sunrise. I would be on sunbeds. Now it's SPF every single day. There's not a day I don't have SPF on. I would never, ever choose to be in the sun. And sometimes now I'll even look back. Like yesterday, for example, I was walking and it was really warm. And I crossed to go on the side where it was shaded. And I was just walking up the street and I just was thinking to myself, I would never do the things that younger me would do. And a part of me finds it quite hard to kind of look back and think, why would I even do that? You know, and it's a frustration partly, but also I'm really grateful that I was able to live through that to know better, you know, and I think the lesson so young maybe was vital, you know, and it's really grounded me in the respect that it's really important to protect yourself. I mean, your skin is your biggest organ, you know, you have to protect that, and it's kind of like your skin is like who you are, and I think you need to look after that and sort of make sure you're protecting it in any way possible and being safe with it and, you know, being cautious. So yeah, it's completely changed everything I once thought was right to, you know, now realising what is actually right.
And do you still feel like you can enjoy the sun, or like?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more than you enjoy waking up in the morning and seeing the sun in the sky.
So true.
You know, it boosts, even when you're out and about, like working all day long. I mean, sometimes you don't want to work all day long, but when you see the sun outside, it does just boost your mood. It is like a serotonin booster in it. You just love to see the sun. And I can enjoy it. I like being out in the sun, but I know how to enjoy it safely, you know? And I think it's taken me a long time to learn how to do that safely and understand what sun safety is and, you know, and protecting your skin. But yeah, I don't hate the sun. I love the sun. I love being out in the sun.
I think sometimes you could feel like maybe this experience scares you.
For sure.
you know?
For sure. And for a long time it did, I'll
Yeah.
be honest. I mean, I wouldn't even go on holidays. Everybody would ask me to go on holidays. I didn't want to go on holidays. I didn't want to be exposed to the glare and heat all day long. And, and I think it did for a long time as well. I was young and I had to grow up whilst I was sick. So I think when you grow up in that environment, it just alters your life completely. It is just life-altering trauma, and I just didn't want to be out in the sun, or I didn't want to be somewhere where it was, the potential was there. I didn't want to do these things. So, yeah, I mean, it was for a long time. It was trying to learn how to do it comfortably and to what I wanted to do. And yeah, I mean, it did stop me from doing a lot of things. At one point in my life when I was really dipped in my mental health, it just really just didn't want to be out, and I think that was kind of an excuse for me. I don't want to be out because the sun's out. I don't want to be here because there's nowhere to shade, and I think that mentality took over for a long time. But now I love the sun. I really like. I just love seeing the sun.
And you find that balance again.
Yeah. And I think having people around you who are willing to understand that. Do you know what I mean? Like all my friends, nobody in their lives have ever had cancer. Cancer's never been in close contact with them. So I think for them it was a new understanding too. So they're really aware of, if we are ever somewhere and it is hot, that we need to be somewhere with shade, or like my family will always go under an umbrella, or so on and so forth. So I think you need to surround yourself too with people who are willing to adapt to that with you. And I think that makes it just that little bit easier, so you don't kind of feel like you're the odd one out.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And you can still enjoy communal activities.
For sure, yeah. And I think, like I said, it's just that little bit of ease that, it's not just you that has to sit out of, or you have to sit over here while everybody sits over here, or it's getting everybody around you to kind of. And it's not that they have to do it. I mean, they can obviously, of course, they'll sit in the sun, or they can go and, ponder about wherever they want to go. But it's just that they're aware that this is what you want to do, and this is how it's going to look for you. And that just makes it that little bit easier.
Definitely.
For sure.
In terms of we're seeing, that stat, an increasing rise in Gen Z, using sunbed tanning. How does that make you feel?
It's sad, it is really, really sad. And it's almost just disheartening, because I think we've tried to push this for years, and people will say to me now, but you knew the seriousness of it, or it was different when I was that age, it was a decade ago. We've come on leaps and bounds in a decade, times have completely changed. So I mean, when I was younger, there were sunbed shops where there wasn't even any people working in. You just kind of went in and it was almost like a self-service sunbed shop. So, and that would never be the case now. Laws would never allow that now. So I think because we've come so far in kind of the teaching of how dangerous they are, it's just so disheartening to see the rise in the statistics that so many young people are using them, and I think when we've got these social media apps that are advertising, things that they sell across their social medias that are, kind of encouraging this, you just think to yourself, oh, we're just never going to get out of it, just kind of seems like a kick in the teeth. And it's even like my algorithm on social media, I mean, my posts are quite heavily surrounded by skin cancer, sun safety. So for me, naturally, it's obviously going to come up. But the amount I see across social media of young boys and girls, using sunbeds is just, I just wish I could say, come on, it's just not worth it,
It's hard though to almost convince someone though.
It is, yeah. And I think I'm able to have that understanding because I was that once too. I was that, ignorant, young, naive teenager that didn't want anybody to tell me what to do, and I was right and everybody else was wrong, even though everybody was telling me that the possibility could happen, and it did happen. I will now sit back and think to myself, I should have just listened to everybody that is older and wiser and has lived through the experience of life much longer than I have. But like you said, it's so difficult to tell a teenager what to do and kind of monitor what they're doing 24 hours a day and where they are. And they just, it's a really difficult thing to do. And I hope one day that we can get there, but I think it's going to be a long way to go.
And also, I'm just, with tanning and a tanned complexion, it's got a beauty aesthetic attached to it. And especially in things with social media and, that is where those sorts of ideas thrive.
For sure. And I think we live in an age where social media just runs everything. It is, you sit and all you see is people scrolling through their phones, whatever they may be doing. But I think the thing that adds to that so heavily is the societal norms that we place on people these days. You have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you can't do this, you can't do that, And like you said, it's the beauty that's attached to it. I think when people are seeing that being tanned, you're instantly seen as kind of being, like looking better than somebody else who's not tanned. People will kind of like live up to that, and want to chase that little bit of a high that there's a possibility that because they are tanned and the person next to them isn't tanned, and they've got that little bit of status because the way we teach people these days is you have to be pretty, you have to look this way, have to dress this way because it's the cool way to look, it's the cool way to dress. So I think when you attach that to the whole world of beauty and kind of what that entails, it does play a massive part in what is going on, And it's like toxic almost.
Yeah.
Because we are just consumed by just everything we see online.
Do you think that it's very easy, I guess, to almost blame the individual, but actually there's a lot of outward aspects that influence somebody's decision. The beauty industry, Sunbed regulations. What do you think is the right thing to kind of help move us forward? Is it more information giving to younger generations, or is it actually we need bigger industries to get involved in this?
I think it's such a difficult thing because I feel like you're going to please one person and not please the other. Then you're going to please them and not please this person. Do you know what I mean? So it's always going to be like that bounce back of one's right, one's wrong, the other one's right, the other one's wrong. People with a following online have a big influence these days. And as maybe not as great as that is to say, but they do. So a lot of celebrities and big influencers are influential, and I think if we're able to just push that message of these young people can't be doing this to their premature skin, they're still growing, they're still kind of, functioning as a young person. We can't be burning and kind of like damaging skin so young, I think. And if we can push that message from people who have influence, and and I think that being like, I don't know, beauty creators or makeup artists or whatever it may be within maybe the beauty realm, or like men who, I don't know, footballers to say, for example, somebody who's really influential to that kind of age group. I think if we can push that would make a big difference. And I think the information is there, but not enough. I think we really need to, when you see skin cancer information, it's always mixed in with kind of a lot of other cancers, and I think I was having this conversation the other day where I seen a poster and it was to look out for the signs of cancer, and it had every kind of like common sign of cancer and then markers underneath every point, and then it just got to the skin cancer, the mole, and it just said a difference in a mole. There was no kind of explanation, and I think if we can get that to be more extensive across every kind of aspect of how we can do that, would be a lot more influential to, young people.
Definitely. And I mean, in terms of the beauty industry, I think there is this weird, or not weird, but the idea around tanning, I think a lot of people associate it more with beauty than, say, skin damage. I think damage doesn't even come to somebody's mind first thing when thinking about a tan.
Yeah, it doesn't. It never comes into play. Ever comes into play, you know? And I think, like I said, we're so heavily influenced by the world of social media these days, and we see so much and take in so much. When we see tanning, we automatically connect it with, we tend to make ourselves feel better. We tend to make ourselves look better, but we don't connect it with the dangers that come with that feeling good and looking good. Do you know what I mean? So I think if we can connect that and make people realise that, okay, we understand that it may make you feel good, or it may, in your head, you look better, but we're not connecting it to the fact that you're also damaging your skin. You're also hurting your body, you know? You're also heightening the risk of having skin cancer. It's not a game, you know? It's not just making yourself look better, it's your health. It's the one thing that we can't put a cost on, and I think we just really need to realise that.
Absolutely. In terms of, you know, what you want to, sharing your story and sharing your experience, what do you hope is the future around talking about skin cancer?
I mean, I would love for them to be banned. I'll be honest. I would love for Sunbeds to be banned. Do I think that is going to happen anytime soon? I don't think so. Maybe, I mean, I'm hopeful that one day it will kind of be the case. But for now, I just want to push that message of people just being precautious, you know, and drop in the idea of, we need to be this way, we need to be tanned, we need to look this way, we need to, this is what, you know, like this is the perfect way to look. It's not. It's just what you're seeing online and you're taking in. And to realise that, you know, this is like, it's like your armour, you know, your skin is like who you are. And I think if we're not protecting that, then we're not protecting ourselves. If we're kind of letting go of this front layer, then what are we letting ourselves do to our insides too? And I think understanding that you can take precautions and still enjoy the sun, like I said. You can do all these normal everyday things without having to, you know, bake your skin, you know, and hurt yourself, and you not bring yourself into the danger of having cancer, you know. And it's not easy. It's really difficult. I mean, I thought it was easy at one point. Really not. You know, it damaged me far beyond anything. And there was a point in my life where I didn't think I was ever going to get out of that hospital. And it's frightening, it's scary. And if I can live through that and kind of not have anybody, I mean, somebody else is going to get diagnosed, and it's going to keep going on and on and on. But if we can kind of minimise that because of a sunbed, then I'd be, you know, I'd be happy. For sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for joining me on this episode.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That Cancer Conversation. You can find more episodes on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any cancer questions you'd like us to explore for future episodes, let us know in the comments or email podcast@cancer.org.uk.